Welcome. Anne-Imelda Radice has served in the leadership capacity of 3 federal cultural agencies, and she's here to talk to us about why she has dedicated her life to preserving our heritage in the arts and libraries. So welcome, Anne.
Well, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Now, what were those 3 agencies anyway?
Well, I was the chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts. I was the deputy chairman for programs at the Humanities Endowment, and was the director of the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which dealt with 18,000 museums and 123,000 libraries.
Those are all very huge jobs. So you must be a pretty special person. What is it about you that would put you in such influential positions? What do you have?
A little luck and some training, and I think perhaps I was there at the right moment. It's always been clear to me that when one takes on the responsibility, especially of a federal agency, it's never about the person, it's about serving the public, serving the American people. And I've always felt that way. It was a value handed to me by my parents, I have to say. So that it was always about service.
So it's so much content knowledge that you had about culture and the arts and library, or is it more your ability to lead? Well,
I would say that, well, thank you for asking the question, but I think I also know what I don't know. And yes, I have a lot of training and was fortunate to have a lot of education, but I also recognize when people have certain skill sets, so that I've always tried to put the right people together and just let them do what they should do and to be there to support them. I've just become the director of the American Folk Art Museum, and when I arrived, I found people who are totally dedicated to the mission of this institution. Now, obviously, I'm going to make changes, and conservation's part of it, and all of those things. However, it's about people, and if you respect people and respect what they can do, it's easy to sort of not strangle them and have a stranglehold on things. So that's sort of the way I've operated.
So when you come into an agency like the American Folk Art Museum, and how do you evaluate what's happening and what needs to be done? How do you do that?
A lot of it, well, I would also say common sense enters into a lot of this, but I think it's very important to understand the mission of the organization or the federal agency, whatever, and to see if all of the activities that are clearly evident to you are serving that mission. And what kind of support is the organization giving to taking care of its work, to promoting education, to involving people? To me, talking to a group of museum directors, although a lot of fun, has very little value. To me, to have the opportunity to talk to a room of people who've maybe never even been to an art museum has more value, because those are the people we want to come back. Those are the people we want to go and talk to their children. Those are the people who are the fabric of our society, and we really want to help them out.
So what would be a specific example of where you saw that something wasn't quite right in one of the agencies and corrected it or modified it? Something specific that was more helpful, more accessible, more educational for your population?
I've always focused on educational programs, and oftentimes in federal agencies, educational programs get elevated to such an intellectual level that it's very scary. I mean, unless you're a PhD in the subject, it's going to be difficult for you to sort of follow what's going on. So I've always been insistent that educational programs reach all ages. And to me, the broad term, I suppose, is audience development. But if you're not introduced as a child to music and the arts, when you're older, it's not going to be something on your radar screen. And in today's world, as we know, we have lots of challenges and things trying to grab our attention. Art technology-based society has many wonderful things about it, but being present in the presence of the original object, or holding that book in the library, or watching someone dance, or watching someone sing, or performing yourself, that's different. It's not just about being an observer from a distance. You have to engage, and that's part of life, I think.
What do you think is happening to the whole movement of museums and in terms of cultural movement? Are we moving toward having more museums or more preservation and more libraries, or less? How's that going?
They grow. I mean, sometimes you have some museums that might work in conjunction with each other, but in general, the museum growth is alive and well.
Oh, really?
People feel very strongly about certain things, whether it's a heritage or a collection. There are many private museums, meaning individuals' collections, that are now coming to the fore. And it's because people feel so strongly they want to share this. And one way to do it is to, quote, have a museum. The legal definition of a museum is that it has to be a facility open to the public that doesn't discriminate against public entry and is open at least 180 days a year, either by appointment or walking in. Now, that's sort of funny to think about that, but we have to have a legal definition when grants are made and stuff like that. But to me, I used to have to testify before Congress all the time, and I will leave.
That must have been fun.
Oh, it was so enjoyable.
Yeah, right.
But one time, I'll never forget it. A museum had opened up that was of a very specific nature. It was one form of decorative arts. I don't even want to say it is because people will recognize it immediately. Anyway, it's a terrific museum. And there was a senator who really wanted to lay me out for, so giving this thing a grant. And I said, well, have you ever visited it? Well, no, I don't have time to. I said, well, you ought to visit it. I said, because it's much more than a display of those particular objects. It talks about American history in that region of the country. It talks about language. It talks about other forms of dance and music. I said, it's a big story, not a little story. And they chose to take a particular object and use that as a way to tell the story. So for me, Senator, I say bravo.
And so that was a creative way, although it may have been potentially offensive or
it wasn't,
something.
nothing offensive. It was just he didn't like it.
He didn't like it. That was all
like
there was to it. So it can be very political.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Little p and large p.
Right, yeah. So what's some of the most powerful projects that you've undertaken in this area and all the different agencies that you've worked for? What was there one that was particularly controversial, particularly influential?
Well, I'm perhaps most known for my work in preservation and conservation. And a large national and international program called Connecting to Collections is still very active, and thanks to all the people who were there from the beginning, in the middle, and right now, it's very successful. I just had a bright idea. They helped get it all done. I would say that when I was at the Humanities Endowment, I was especially proud of a project called Picturing America, where 20 major masterpieces, whether it's a Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington or a piece of folk art or whatever, these works were blown up into large scale poster size, then put into plastic. Holes were drilled so that you could hang them, and there were 10 pieces with a whole description of the works themselves, with a teacher's guide, you name it, sent out to schools across the United States. Teachers and kids could curate their own shows. The thing was just laden with information. I thought that was fun, and I think it had a lot of value. And I can see this concept being used in other forms. When I was at the Arts Endowment, I was so proud of the educational programs that came out of the Arts Endowment.
Which would be like what?
For schools, for youngsters. And it had been avoided for a while, and things had sort of, you know, migrated to other things. So
Right.
I redirected that.
And so that's a particular love and passion of yours to make art accessible, make it
Absolutely.
and bring it to young children,
To everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, we also, at the time I was at the Arts Endowment, the Disability Act was and one time a museum I'll leave nameless.
Oh, come on.
Oh, I can't. It was very difficult. It was a historical facility, and you know, wasn't built to accommodate wheelchairs, but it could have put a ramp right away. As soon as the law was passed, it could have put a ramp, and you know, you deal with other things one thing at a time. They didn't do it. And so I cut their grant immediately. I pulled every penny that we were giving them. And the senator of that area showed up at my office, and was very upset. And then I explained to the senator, I said, well, gee, would you like your name associated with the fact that these folks had, oh, no. They had a ramp the next day, and I think a half hour after the ramp went up, the grant went back.
Sure.
But Americans with Disabilities Act, very important. Special needs, we did a lot. Other thing I was very proud of, we did a video, of course you don't even use the word video anymore,
Sure.
about why the arts are important and about the economic impact of arts. And I personally delivered that video to every member of Congress and every senator, and it was played at the White House. It was something that helped strengthen the National Endowment for the Arts. And all it was just showing what it did. Nothing else.
Why are the arts important?
I remember
life?
Walter Cronkite narrated our video, and he said, the arts make us human. And he went off script because we had written something like, the arts open up vistas and blah, blah, blah. And he just said, the arts make us human. And I think he was right on with that. The arts are important because they involve creativity. They make us go to a different place, not just the mundane. And the arts are part of daily life. The design of a glass or the design of a table, that has an impact on it. Visual impact is very, very important. And listening to poetry or music, it brings us to a different place. So I'm a big proponent of beauty as well. Now, I realize that sometimes the arts have to shake us up a little bit and maybe go to places that are not so pleasant.
Right.
But it takes you somewhere else.
And that's certainly what we need to do.
I think we do.
From the mundane at times, definitely.
I think so.
What about the impact of the electronic media and the electronic age and computers and all of that? Is that having a detrimental impact on the arts? Or
No,
what?
well, it's interesting because certainly there's also electronic arts now.
Sure.
A whole new realm of expression has come in. But we know from research that people visit museums and libraries 1 billion times a year. All right? Now, among those billions of visits, most of them are in person, the rest are virtual. When the virtual started to become more prevalent, people were afraid, oh, no one's going to visit my museum, no one's going, because they can just look on the internet. Wrong. Yes, there are times when there's no way a person can travel, whether it's physical or that it's too far away. Sure. So this gives the world the possibility of seeing whatever you're working on, which is wonderful. In general, people have used the internet to plan out their visit. Or they get engaged in something and they want to know more. The other thing, because of the way all these words are linked, you might just have an interest. You say, gee, you know, I'm really interested in blue pillows. Or you type in blue pillows. And all of a sudden, something comes up, even an exhibition or a book or you name it. And so it helps. Now, the thing that I'm concerned about is that the youngest generations, they need to be brought by the hand continually to the museum and to the library. And yes, use all the electronic things that are so wonderful, but not to lose touch with the actual physical interaction.
I think that's certainly the challenge because people are, and especially young people, are so totally into the electronic and,
Yes.
and captivated by that. Are there ways that people are learning to interact with the arts that are different than previously?
I think that there's many more sophisticated approaches. When you were talking about the electronic issues, I was thinking about one time I was in a restaurant, and it was clear that there was a family sitting around a table eating dinner, and everybody was like this with the BlackBerry. Sure. And so I went over to them and I asked them what they're doing. They were talking to each other.
Yeah, texting each other.
Texting each other.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, why didn't you put them down for a second, just talk to each other?
Right.
So I think if there's a balance, everything is great. Yeah. But I do think electronics have added a lot too.
Right. So in the positive sense.
I think it's positive.
And how about your expertise is preservation, and so given that you have all of this art out there, all of these books, manuscripts, what have you, how do you decide what you're going to preserve and what you're not going to preserve? How do you sift through all of that?
It's really an individual call according to the organization, because there's no master plan as to what stays, what goes. Also, you almost have to try to think about what you want people to remember and not edit so stringently, because if you do, there won't be the complete picture.
Right.
There's nothing worse than revisionist history.
Right.
And boy, we've all lived through it, and you wonder if the people of the 18th century, the 19th century, the 8th century could be right here looking at what was written in a history book, they would just about lose it.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge.
That's a key challenge.
Absolutely a challenge. I think what has to happen is when information is preserved or presented, you just present it. You don't interpret it.
Right.
You just present it. Here's the book. Okay? Now, it's going to be interpreted by you and me this way, maybe 20 years from now somewhere else. One of the things about the electronic age is that books now mostly are also put into a digital format when they're produced. So that's very, very helpful. But it's pretty clear, I think, which are the things that we shouldn't toss. We just have to have I do. I think we just have to have the courage to say, okay, I got to take a stand here.
So what would be an example of that?
When you have first editions of great authors, you certainly want to make sure you can get your hands on all of those. That's just an example. When you have art, that's a little more difficult. But they're clearly, through museums, through scholarship, you recognize important pieces, and you want to make sure those are not hurt or overused or whatever. And because of the digital image, you can certainly photograph every possible work of a particular artist, even though all those things may never be on display. And God forbid something happens, at least you have the record.
Right.
It's about records.
Yeah. Now, what about can you give me some examples of revisionism and gone wrong in history that people might relate to? I know there's a lot of them out there. Yeah.
That is what do the politicians say? That's a slippery slope.
Yeah, right.
I think, let me give you categories, all right?
Okay.
I think especially history. I was the first director, the founding director of the National Museum of Women in the Arts. I grew up with Jansen's History of Art. Everybody did. The only work of art by a woman in that book was a picture by Mary Cassatt. I happened to go to a lecture by the founder of the museum, and she's mentioning Renaissance arts, and she's doing this and that, and I'm thinking, I have a PhD, I've never heard of these artists. Now, in a way, they always joke, that was his story. How about her story? So what the Women's Museum did was not to be, aggressively screaming at people, but say, look, here's a venue, we're going to show art by women. and we're going to fill in the blanks here. So that someone said to me, well, how will you know you're successful? I said, we'll know we're successful when we go into any museum in the United States and there's art by women and art by men and nobody cares. And they're not segregated off.
Right.
That to me is a pretty good example.
Right, okay. And so a lot of times the manipulation of art and culture and revisionism is used to control the population, right? I mean, so for example, the obvious would be like Nazi Germany.
Yes.
I mean, so
yes, the image. Well, that was sort of that was propaganda at its worst, of course, and that was using people's ability to communicate to really dominate. And yes, you can look at those movies and see how technically terrific they are, but there's no way you can accept them, I don't think, as art.
Right, yeah.
They're simply a terrible record of a terrible time.
Right.
And I had the chance one time, a great deal of art from Nazi Germany was brought to the United States and put in the Pentagon for storage until things all got worked out. And there were some, pieces. You saw it in Soviet Russia as well. The glorification of things that are wrong, simply wrong. So you accept it as a historic record, but you certainly don't herald it as art, in my opinion.
Right. How do you determine what's art and what's not, other than something like that?
Well, I think quality. Absolutely quality. You can see when something's well done. You can see if it engages you. You see it how it relates to other expressive forms around you. And you have training. I mean, I have some training. I think I'm able to look at something and give a general view of, well, that's not so well done, that's well done. So there are people like me, there are lots of people like me, and I think the more you look, the more you develop your eye. To me, it's in the eye. It's the aesthetic. It's being able to relate to something and see what it means to you.
Is art something that is totally subjective, or are there objective parameters?
I think there's certainly parameters depending on the particular era, the style, whatever. No, I think you can. You can judge.
You can judge. Okay.
Right. It's not all Emperor's New Clothes. No.
Yeah. Right.
Not at all.
No. Now, what's going on with libraries these days? I understand that. I know a lot of the towns that I've been in and so forth, they're actually shrinking their hours and that kind of thing. Has the internet, the proliferation of the internet, affected libraries, and what's going to be the role of libraries in the future, do you think?
Oh, libraries are not going anywhere. I think the shrinkage is simply due to economic issues and the lack of vision of some of the town fathers in those towns that you visited, because the library is the heart of any community. Think about ancient Greece and Rome, the importance of the library. It's never changed. And the librarian is the person you go to and you ask advice, you ask information. Librarians are great people, and so we should do all we can to make sure our libraries stay open.
So why is it the heart? I mean, because now you can access any piece of information on the internet.
Yes, but there's something wonderful about going into the library, seeing the books, talking to a person, saying, I've got a research project. Now, the librarian may help you use the internet to find your answers, but it's about dialogue. It's about having community programs. Libraries teach English as a second language to people. Libraries are the place where you can go and learn about health issues. They've become community centers. After Katrina, people went to the libraries to find their friends, because everybody knows where the library is.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Now, if you look at libraries, how are they going to evolve in the future? I mean, so
I think actually they've been ahead of the curve.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they were involved right away with the use of technology. They helped develop some of the technology that now we're taking for granted. No, indeed, they're always ahead of the curve, because librarians are very resourceful.
Yeah, right. Well, you're countering a lot of the biases and prejudices we have against librarians and libraries. So I will treat them with a new level of respect.
Absolutely.
I think. Yeah. What is it that you've failed to do in your mission? Where have you just not?
Well, I guess there
gotten?
wasn't enough hours in the day. And someone asked me once, well, if what would you have done in addition at the Institute of Museum and Library Services? And I guess I would have grappled more publicly with this: how do you interrelate technology with the more traditional style of learning? But I went where I thought I could do the best. I knew that appointment was for 4 years, and I made a promise to myself that every day I'd try to accomplish something. So that would have been the only thing I really would have liked to continue.
Yeah.
But I love watching the agency now, and it's, people love it, and they should, because the agency loves them back.
Yeah, right. That's good. I don't know about you, but I do have a much greater appreciation of the role of our libraries and curators and archivists in preserving our culture and our civilization. So let us know what you've learned by contacting us on Facebook, Twitter, or our website. Thank you so much for watching.